حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه
اللهم صل على محمد وآله
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم به نستعين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أرواحنا له فداء أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وجعلناهم أئمة يهدون بأمرنا صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jum'ah Mubarak. And I also congratulate you all on the auspicious occasion of the birthday of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salatu wasalam. Of course, the birthday of our 8th Imam, it was a couple of days ago, but nonetheless, there are folks who are still in this atmosphere of celebrating and remembering the Imam. So inshallah, the khutbahs that I will deliver today will be based on the advice that we received from our 8th Imam. And it is a worthy advice to hear. In fact, in the first khutbah, one that I heard recently myself, and I say first and foremost, this is a reminder to me, and then a reminder to all of you. And why is it important to understand the advice from the Imams, alayhim salatu wasalam, especially those who come from the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? In two places in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He speaks about those leaders who have been guided by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In one verse, He says, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا. That He has created from among them, from among the leaders of this ummah, those imams who guide by the principle, guide by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَمَّا صَبَرُوا وَكَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يُوقِنُونَ. Because they were patient, and these are the qualities that you will find in such leaders, such imams, that they were patient and they had absolute certainty about the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the other verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِمْ فِعْلَ الْخَيْرَاتِ. In the other, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He states that we have made them imams, leaders, and we have inspired them with good actions. فِعْلَ الْخَيْرَاتِ. So they are patient, they have certainty with regards to the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the ayat of Allah, whether those ayat are the Quran itself, the verses that come in the Quran, whether those ayat is the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also among those signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they are those who are inspired with good deeds and good actions. And as we will see, that they also inspire us, encourage us for good deeds and for good actions. So when we think of Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salatu wasalam, as one of his titles also, Gharib al-Ghuraba, the Imam who is buried in Khurasan, who when we look at where his grave is, his shrine is, it is far from the shrines of the other Ahlul Bayt, far from Medina, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is buried, and a group of our Imams far from Iraq, Najaf and Karbala. So this is why he's considered Gharib al-Gharaba. And according to one of the hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he predicted, he says that, yes, I will have a son, meaning an offspring who will be buried in a faraway place. And if you visit this place, you visit this shrine, then if you ask your needs, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant those needs at this place. Because it is a sacred space. It's a place that I will say by first-hand account that I've seen this happen. In fact, even some of the requests and the answer to that request was completely miraculous. Something that the request that was made had to deal with some medical issues that a person had. And the person went to very good doctors in Spain, France, Canada, all over the world. No results. So they went to the shrine, this sacred area in Khorasan that we consider Mashhad. We call Mashhad the grave of the son of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They made their du'as, they prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as the Prophet of Allah said, that whatever you request, it will be granted. It was granted. And the doctors were actually confused at how is this even possible? So this is something I've seen firsthand account. And many of us, when we hear this, we go to such sacred places, we pray in such sacred places, we have a request sometimes, because that request in that sacred space is often a request for that imam who was martyred, and as the Quran says that they're living in Allah, they're living with Allah, or by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sustaining them. But we don't understand. Yes, it is a metaphysical concept. So when we pray in that space, we are seeking, or we're asking that martyred imam that, look, we have this request, we have this need, that you make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for my need. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not reject your dua. This is the philosophy of why that dua is answered. But many of us, we go with expectations from the imam, from such sacred places. But we also have to realize that the imam has expectation from us as well. It's not simply that we go, oh, well, let's go there and have our du'as answered, our prayers answered. But there's no expectation from me as someone who claims to follow the example of Rasulullah and follow the example of the Ahlul Bayt, the imams from the lineage of Rasulullah. There's an expectation. And even, I would say, the imam of our time also has that expectation. And this is something that Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida, alayhi salatu salam, he explains to one of his companions by the name of Abdul Azim, and those who are from Iran, you know who Abdul Azim is, and those who have made the ziyarah there, they should know this is Shah Abdul Azim, the Imam Zadeh, as they say that, like Imam Sadiq, he said there will come a time when it will be difficult to go to Karbala to make ziyarah. And so the Imam, he advised, he says, when that time comes, he says, then you go and you make ziyarah and you visit Shah Abdul Azim, who's buried in the town of Ray, which is just right outside of Tehran. So because the thawab, the reward is equal in that time, that when you cannot visit Imam Hussein, go to Shah Abdul Azim. So Shah Abdul Azim, he is the one who's narrating this from Imam Rida, our 8th Imam. And the Imam Rida tells him, he says, Ya Abdul Azim, abligh anni awliya'i as-salam. Says that, tell my awliya, those who follow me, those who claim La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, those who attach themselves to the Ahlul Bayt, the Imams. They said that we follow the Imams after Rasulullah. He says, Balligh, give them my salams. Wa qul lahum, and tell them. These are the expectations that the Imam has from those individuals he calls his awliya, those who he calls his followers. He gives 6 expectation. What does he expect from us? How does he expect us to act? Again, as we said, those imams that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided and inspired for good, and they are inspiring us. And their expectation from us is also fi'l al-khayrat, to be the best individuals that we can be. So this is the expectation of Imam Rida. So the first thing he says, tell them, Allah yaj'alu lish-shaytani ala anfusihim sabila, to not allow shaitan to control it. Do not give him any road to yourself, to the direction that you take in life, to the choices you make in life. And of course, shaitan will come at us at different ways. Those negative whispers. Again, he's not going to approach maybe a man who's in his 80s or 90s. He's not going to tell him, oh, hey, look at this woman. Look, see her. So man is probably going to, I don't have time for that. But for the youth, yes, he's going to approach you. Someone who perhaps sits and tries to do their best to be religious and pray, come to the masjid. It's probably not going to tempt you with some very debaucherous action, but then when you're sitting around together and then, oh, it's going to say, oh, there's no problem. This person did this with riba. Each person is going to come to you with a different tool in order to divert you from your duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to divert you from those good actions and take you to something that is wrong. So we have to know ourselves. This is a part of where the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Man arafa nafsuhu faqad arafa rabbah." That person who knows himself, again, they know their weakness. They know that, oh, well, what are the things that I can be tempted with? Some people, you can't tempt them with money. They don't care about it. So, I have it, I'll give it away. If I have it, I have it. I don't have it. Others will be tempted by money. Some will be tempted with other things. What they're looking at, what they're hearing, what they're saying, what they're doing. Know yourself so that you can avoid those temptations of shaitan. This is the first advice of Imam. This is his first expectation for those who say that, yes, you follow the way of Rasulullah, you follow the way of the Ahlul Bayt. The second expectation, he says, وَمُرْهُمْ بِالصِّدْقِ فِي الْحَدِيثِ. He says, and command them, tell them that they must be truthful in their speech. That whatever they say, it should be truthful, should be honest. And of course, as we know from Rasulullah, and we find in many of the hadith, that it says, be truthful, even if it's against yourself. حتى على نفسك. Be truthful in your speech. The third thing, وَأَدَاءِ الْأَمَانَةِ, and to honor your trust. If someone has entrusted you with something, you must honor that trust. You must not, again, default on that trust that has been placed in your hand. And of course, one of the greatest trusts that we find that our imams, the Sayyid Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wasalam. Actually, when he goes to bury his beloved wife, the beloved daughter of Rasulullah, Fatima Zahra, salamu alayha, they said at one point he turns towards the grave of Rasulullah. He says, Ya Rasulullah, I'm returning back to you this amana that we've placed in life. His family, his wife. We must honor our trust, as the Imam says. The fourth thing that the Imam he expects from us, he says, وَمُرْهُمْ بِالسُّكُوتِ وَتَرْكِ الْجِدَالِ فِيمَا لَا يَعْنِيهِمْ. He says that to argue and to debate over things which are not important, he says, remain quiet on those things. Why get involved in those things that, on one hand, they are not directing you towards your akhirah, towards building and establishing your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of those things, and I've seen this though, some people, they will argue and debate just simply to argue and debate. not to gain knowledge and understanding of something. So I just want to argue with this person. I just want to make sure that my point is. Your own sister, well, leave this. But what value does it have when you're not gaining knowledge from it, nor are you guiding anyone? You're arguing simply to carry. So the Imam says, leave this. The fifth expectation that the Imam he has from us, from his awliya, he says, وَإِقْبَالِ بَعْضِهِمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ وَالْمُزَاوَرَةِ فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ قُرْبَةٌ إِلَيْهِ. Subhanallah. He says to accept one another. Again, those individuals who are among the followers of it, he says, look towards yourself. Be accepting of one another. Visit one another. He says, because in that, وَقُرْبَةٌ إِلَيْهِ. Says if you want to get close to the Imam, then you have to have a close relationship with yourselves. Not individuals who are at odds with one another. No. Iqbal, to be accepting of one another, to visit one another, to establish your relationship with one another, because in that you will gain closest to us. And of course, and if you're close with the Imams, then you will be close with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because they've been inspired, fi'l al-khayrat, they've been inspired with good actions, good deeds, that those very good actions and deeds that they will impart upon all of us. The fifth thing which the Imam he expects from his awliya, those who follow him, he says, وَلَا تَشْغِلُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ بِتَمْزِيقِ بَعْضِهِمْ بَعْضًا. Subhanallah. This is perhaps a bit of emphasis as well, but from a different perspective on the last part, about being accepting of one another, visiting one another. He says, do not busy yourselves with. Don't have that ishtighal, don't have that, or even that desire to destroy and to pull down one another, to belittle one another. That we must constantly be helping one another, building each other up, supportive of each other. This is to gain closeness to the Ahlul Bayt. First, if you're close to the Imams, you're close to Rasulullah. If you're close to the Imams and Rasulullah, you're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it comes through, again, building rapport with one another. It comes through helping and supporting one another, looking out for the interests of one another. It comes through, again, being truthful, sidqul hadith. It comes through, again, just not entering into frivolous talk and discussion and debates just for no reason. It comes through, again, yes, on a personal level, staying away from shaitan, temptations, and definitely if we can help and support others from also staying away, then we do that. This is the expectations that our Imam has from us. But if we are truly the followers of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, then we will meet these expectations and not simply have our own expectations from our Imams that we make tawassul and we request those who have been martyred and they are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we request them to take our du'as to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so our du'as can be answered. No, we fulfill those expectations as well, so that we can be among those who also live our life inspired with what? Fi'l al-khayrat. Good actions and good deeds. I'm going to pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to educate us through the Quran and the teachings and example of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And more importantly, that we act upon these advices. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلى الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم به نستعين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين الرسول المصدد المصطفى الأمجد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أوصيائه وأولياء الله أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب والحسن بن علي والحسين بن علي وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المنتظر المهدي. عجل الله تعالى فرجه. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله صدق الله العلي العظيم. First and foremost, I advise myself for taqwallah, consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every action. Then I advise each of you for taqwallah, consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every action. In order to gain this taqwallah, as we define as consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we must have what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He calls and He terms in the Quran as libas al-taqwa. And this comes in Surah Al-A'raf, so the 7th chapter of the Quran, verse 26. And it comes in light of the story of Adam alayhi salam. One reason why I'm mentioning this story as well, because as I was reading over the news, just looking at various stories, an interesting story popped up. And it did create some controversy. There was some controversy that was stated, and this was the Prime Minister, Imran Khan. He made a statement about the unfortunate aspect of the rise of rape in Pakistan, which is in any place, no matter whether it's Pakistan, no matter whether it's Canada, America, Iran, Iraq, no place, any place on this earth. Very despicable and heinous crime. It is a disrespect to women, and not only women, disrespect to the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the controversy came in his statement about stating that, well, the rise is because of the way women dress. And I always say that, and again, of course, the way it comes off and the way it sounds, and again, I don't know his intention, but definitely the way it sounds, because this only has a one-dimensional focus that, oh, well, women should not be dressed the way they are, and it creates this instance where rape is on the rise, that women are being attacked. And I always say that, yes, there's a partial truth to that. There's a partial truth to that. And of course, by looking at the whole situation in one dimension, yes, you're going to be coming under scrutiny. And why would I say there's a partial truth to that? Yes, even if we look at our own statistics, the BJS, the Bureau of Justice Statistics, again, a organization here in America, they actually take statistics of crimes. And if we look at violent crimes, and again, against people, especially against women, rape, it's interesting, when you look at the chart, during the summer times, the rape and attack actually spikes. When it comes to the winter, it actually dips. The only place where I saw that, oh, well, seems very interesting, that it seemed to be a dip in the case during the summer, was the summer of 2000. I don't know, maybe people were so focused on Y2K and that, oh, the world is going to end or things are going to stop, but maybe it dipped. Allahu Akbar, Allah knows best. But when you look at that chart during the summertime, that it spikes, crime spikes, especially violence against women, violence against other people as well. But one of the things that we do see during the time is that, yes, people are wearing less clothes. During the winter, people are covering up more. There's perhaps less of a temptation for individuals. However, the reality of this matter, because it's not just one-dimensional, that women need to dress better. No, men also need to dress better. In fact, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need to have this libasul taqwa. And what is this libasul taqwa? It's not necessarily the clothes that we put on our back. Yeah, this is an apparent aspect of libasul taqwa, the dress of piety, the dress of God consciousness. But that dress of God consciousness is actually more profound than this. When we look at Surah Al-A'raf, in fact, if we go ahead, I'll just give you the reference, and you guys can read this afterwards. And you go back to verse 22 of Surah Al-A'raf, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's telling you the story about Adam and Eve in paradise. And of course, apparently, this is something that actually overlaps even with the biblical story, but apparently there was no dress. But when Allah created them of clay and they were in the paradise, and so long as their consciousness was focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then their nakedness didn't really have any meaning. But as soon as they partake from the forbidden tree or whatever, at that point, and Allah says, at that point, they began to what? Badat lahuma sawatuhuma. At that point, then they became aware of this materialistic and this physical aspect of each other. At that point, they became aware of their nakedness. This aspect also happens to us in this world as well. Yeah, we didn't live that life in a paradise, but within the Sharia, we have this category for young people that either they're mumayyiz or they're not mumayyiz. What does that mean? Mumayyiz is when a child becomes aware of themselves and they become aware of what is right and wrong. But before that, they're ghayru mumayyiz, as we categorize. A child of 2 years old, 3 years old, for example, if they're laying down and some other baby or somebody else is naked, they don't comprehend what exactly that means. They have no recollection. And even many of us probably say, we don't remember that. That's a point of kind of innocence. At that point, our intellect is covered from this completely physical and aspect of, again, this nakedness. I have no understanding. But then there's a point that, yes, a child will begin to mature, and then they become aware of their bodies. They become aware of other people's bodies. That is the point where they become mumayyiz. And if we look at the ahkam according to that, then there's a certain action and how you interact with that child that is mumayyiz. That young girl who is mumayyiz, that before, yes, she's your daughter or she's your niece, then okay, fine, you can put her on your lap and so that. But at that point, she becomes mumayyiz. You cease that. There's a particular interaction that happens. Because at that point, they become aware. So this libasul taqwa, as I'm stating, that it is what we need to have. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in verse 26 of Surah Al-A'raf, Ya bani Adam, qad anzalna alaykum libasan yuwari sawatikum. So once that awareness came about, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave them clothes. He gave them something to cover themselves, Adam and Hawa. But that is only symbolic of that true libas, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls libas al-taqwa. But okay, yes, if we are wearing the dress that we should be wearing, we are covering as we should be covering. And it's not that, oh, well, women have to cover all there and men don't cover. No, there's a prescribed dress for us. In fact, even according to one of the riwayat of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and this will be an eye-opener for many of you. But why those women who are covering, who aren't dressing properly, they're actually receiving more reward than we are if we're not dressing properly. Oh, well, we'll wear shorts or this and that. Okay, I have to cover from my navel to our knees. Why? Because of Rasulullah, he says, the more covering you wear, that modesty that you have is every stitch, and this is a metaphysical, I'm saying every stitch of clothes that you have on, it will make dhikr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for your behalf. That, oh Allah, forgive the servant of you, because the servant is dressing in a modest way, is having that libas of taqwa. Every clothing, every bit that we are, again, striving to be more modest, that those clothes, that, again, it's a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Prophet said, he says, everything from the wall, from the sand, from the rocks, everything makes a dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we don't understand it. Our consciousness does not perceive it. So likewise, the Prophet is saying that, yes, every item of clothing that you wear is also making dhikr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that servant who is wearing it. But Allah, that the servant of yours is observing taqwa, libas taqwa. So if we see our sisters that they are covered properly around, and if we're not doing something, we should be envious. Not a bad envious, a good envious. Oh, subhanAllah. Should be a reminder for us that, oh, we should also strive to, again, to have such taqwa, or be aiming for having that libas of taqwa. So by having that libas of taqwa, which is, again, a reminder to us that even those who may not be wearing libas of taqwa, even those who may not be covering, even in the summer, whatever people are dressing like, may not have this understanding and concept. We have this concept. That if others are choosing not to cover, again, our eyes should be covered with libas of taqwa to prevent this debaucherous act that happens in society. An action which Imam Ali bin Musa Rada alayhi salatu wasalam, he also gives some advice about this, about the corruption that it instills. And there are 4 things which he states. He says, Hurrima zina, so fornication is forbidden. Again, whether that fornication is that, oh, the 2 parties, they decide to engage in that fornication, or whether the despicable and debaucherous act of one person raping the other, still zina. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made this forbidden. Hurrima zina lima fihi min al-fasad. Why? Because there's corruption in it. Again, like I said, any society that this is happening in, it is shameful for that society, shameful for those people. And particularly if it is happening, and I would say particularly if it's happening among Muslims, that you have this guidance not only from the Quran, to have libas of taqwa from the Ahlul Bayt, from the Imams. The despicableness of this action. It is forbidden because of what the corruption that it causes. He mentions 4 of the corruptions. There's more, and he says, and like it. But the first he says, min qatl al-anfus. It kills the self. And unfortunately, sometimes it leads to suicide. Some women commit suicide because of the shamefulness. But if it's not that physical suicide or killing that it happens, again, it kills the self, the soul. What type of person would do that action? The thinking self, nafsul mufakkir. The self that has that potential to be a spiritual being, it kills that soul. The emotional self of that woman, that person who is the victim, again, it kills a part of them, psychologically, emotionally, mentally. This is the fasad, this is the corruption that happens from that. Qatl al-nafs. With the dhahab al-ansab, it destroys the lineage. And so it happens, and we see quite often that child, that if a child is born from it, then no one wants to claim the child. Or if the child is claimed, then that child is sometimes not treated the same. Many rape victims as well, if they end up going through with having the child, even here, you say, oh, we're going to give them up for adoption. We don't want to have that memory of what happened. And that leads to something else. This third correction that Imam says, is then the tarbiyah, the education, the training, the rearing of that child becomes in jeopardy. And some of those children who hop from foster home to foster home, some of them don't make it out that well. Mashallah, they're lucky if they get a good foster parent, which inshallah they will, but some of them don't. The fourth thing he mentions, he says, fasad al-mawarith. And then based on the ahkam, the inheritance now becomes also destroyed. That child cannot inherit from the father, even if they knew who the father was. Nor does the father inherit from that child. So all of these things and more, as Imam says, وَمَا أَشْبَهَ ذَلِكَ مِنْ وُجُوهِ الْفَسَادِ. So it creates corruption and disorder in the world. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us libas al-taqwa, consciousness of Him in our every action, the way we dress, the way we carry ourselves, the way we present ourselves, in order to, inshallah, first and foremost, stay away from anything that is vain and vile, such as that action that was mentioned, but also, inshallah, inspire others to have libas al-taqwa as well. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم اغفر ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا واقضي حوائجنا واشف مرضانا وارحم امواتنا وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان واجعلنا من اعوانه وانصاره والمستشيرين بين يديه وتحت لواء بحق محمد واله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل